Pandora's Awareness Podcast, a place where we collect stories and circulate life-changing wisdom. I'm your host, Asher, and our co-host today is Queen Lav. We have two amazing guests, Tina and Kim, and they're going to talk about fear with us today. So we're going to put fear on front stage like we normally do and see what kind of relationship we all been having with fear and what kind of story we get to tell around that relationship with fear and what kind of transformational moments that are happening in our life that we can share that other people might find value in. And I get to connect with Kim. We're gonna start with you first. Kim, could you tell us about where you're hailing from, what you specialize in, who you've been a hero to, and how you're adding value to the world, my friend?
Well, my name is Kim Harms, and I am from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I'm a grandmother. I have six grandchildren, but I'm
Mm.
also, and at my age, when you get to be, I'm 67, so when you get to be my age, I've been around the block, let's say, in life. And during my time, my mother was bipolar and took her own life when I was 17, and then I lost my son to suicide at 19. A brilliant Columbia National Merit Scholar. He's at Columbia University, and he died 45 minutes after his girlfriend broke up with him. He was on top of the world, and we just lost our son, our only son. We have two daughters. And then 3 years ago, I lost my husband to suicide. So, excuse me, I lost my son to suicide. I lost my husband to basically a broken heart after losing my son. So I've dealt with some big life fears and challenges. But my biggest fear, if you were to ask me, my biggest fear when I was younger would be to lose one of my children, and to lose them to suicide would double the fear. I lost my mother again the same way. So I've had to face those things over life, and I spent lots of time in the grief pit. I've been down there with one nostril hanging in there, trying to, you know,
Mm.
just get through the day. But I have learned how to overcome that. I've learned how to, over time, it might took some years, but I have my biggest accomplishment in my life basically was to overcome, uh, work through, fight through basically grief. And I can now be here, be present for my six grandchildren, and not live in the grief pit anymore. I'm not afraid of death. I'm also a public speaker, so I've overcome that too. So I've overcome a lot. I've overcome the biggest two things: fear and death. I mean, public speaking and death. I've taken on, and so that's my story. I'm now working. I've just finished a book. It's called "Are You Ready? How to Build a Legacy to Die For," which it helps other people overcome the fear of death and help people plan to make sure that their lives matter and that they build for the next generation. And they make sure they leave all their stuff that they need to, clean up their mess, do all the work before you die, so that the next generation isn't stuck with a house full of stuff and arguing with each other because things weren't clearly defined. So that's what I'm working on now.
Powerful, Kim. Thank you so much. We're gonna get to grace the surface of that today a little bit. If we gotta get to dig
Yeah,
deep, we can dig deeper
that's right.
too. Yes,
Yeah.
Tina, what about you? Talk to us, please.
Hi, my name is Tina C. Hines. I'm a life transformation specialist, and I work with women around the globe who are on their journey from hurting to healing to happiness. I am originally from the United States. I'm originally born and raised in New Jersey. I currently reside in Morocco with my adult son who has an extra need. And I spent many years in corporate America, and at one point, I no longer felt fulfilled, and I took a
Hmm.
leap without a safety net and leaned into this energy work that I have been called to do. I am a fifth generation intuitive clairvoyant, medium, and healer, and I have been working with some phenomenal women on their journey of healing. And fear. I typically don't lean into fear because I like to feel that fear will limit you. However, a couple of days after arriving in Morocco, I suffered a mild heart attack. And the fear that stood out to me in that moment was I'm in a foreign country where I don't speak the language. I don't have that many friends because the person who invited me here was actually outside of the country when I arrived. And leaving my son here to navigate everything. So, when I was having that experience and recognized that I was having a heart attack, immediately I'm like, call these people on my phone. So they were aware of what was transpiring. So my fear in that moment was leaving my son alone, leaving my son here.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing, both of you. You have been to some stuff. Yes, you have been to some stuff, and the stuff you've been to. Oh, Lab, how you doing over there, Lab?
I am bracing, so there's
Brayson.
not much effect for overcoming all these challenges. I
Hmm.
guess my question, the question that was going through my mind was, so how did you both overcome these challenges and fears that came with this life-changing experiences for both of you? Whoever wants to go first.
I can go first. Um, I am, because of the work that I do, I always look, I look at I don't look at things as problems. I look at them as solutions. And one question that was consistently asked of me after I had the heart attack was, "Are you coming back home?" And I'm like, "What am I coming back home to? Because my car is in storage, my furniture is in storage, and I no longer have a home there." And it allowed me to be vulnerable and allow people to help me, because I know I didn't have the capacity to be superwoman in that moment, because I'm in ICU. So it allowed me to be vulnerable. It allowed me to let people help me, people who I did not know really, and it allowed me to allow my femininity to shine versus leaning into my masculine energy, which is what I've always done as a single mother. And that 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 experience in itself, so many things came to the surface as I was processing, like, how did I get here? Like, I went to the doctors right before I hopped on a plane to get here, and the doctor said, "You're okay to get on the plane." So how did I have a heart attack 2 days later? um, but as I processed everything that happened, I knew that I was supposed to have the heart attack here. I got the best care. I didn't have to give up a kidney in order to pay for the procedure that had to be done. I was awake, and the most interesting thing, the cardiologist said to me, he says, "You were the most relaxed person I have ever had in my operating room." And I had local anesthesia. He went through my arm and the vein in my arm to get to the heart and put a stent in. And he's like, "But you were so calm." And in my mind, I'm saying, well, I was calm for a couple of reasons. Number one, I meditate twice a day. So while he was doing the procedure, I was meditating. And my spirit guides were surrounding me. My grandmothers were around me. And I knew I was protected. I knew I had nothing to worry about. Crazy,
How
but true.
it gives me goosebumps. I'm sure there are other people listening to this have the same sensation. How do you feel their presence, if I may ask? 'Cause maybe there are out there people who maybe have their ancestors around them, but they don't know how to understand their presence, right? You don't see it. How do you feel it? How do you know it?
So I can feel their presence, and people who have worked with me have seen it up close and personal. When typically my gift runs on my mother's side of the family, and it is my mother's mother, who is my grandmother, her sister. So my grandmother had dreams, and she had a journal with some of her dreams written in it, and I had the pleasure of having that journal. Her sister could lay hands on people and heal them. Their mother had psychic abilities, and their grandmother had all the gifts. So when I feel their energy around me, typically my great great grandmother is the only one whose messages that I receive and I hear. The other three, they really are not allowed to speak with me, except my grandmother if it has to do with her children. When my grandmother is channeling through me, my eyes turn blue or gray, and people actually see it. So everybody just blinked on the screen. My eyes turn blue or gray. People have actually seen it, and they recognize it when it happens. And everybody's a friend of Grandma Jenny now. And you know, I didn't find out that I had this gift until I was an adult. And I know there are people like me who find out young as a child that they could see things and they can experience things around them. I didn't find out till I was an adult, and it never scared me. It never made me uncomfortable, because I knew there was something. I just couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. And what is great is my grandmother's niece, who was the elder of our family, is still alive. And she's the one who made me aware that what I was experiencing was I'm not going crazy, that I do have a gift. And she reminded me that I am just like my great great grandmother. And she also has a gift. And some of her daughters have the gift as well. I'm the only one who's really leaning into it because I know that this foundation was laid out for a specific reason, specifically because of the work that my grandmothers did. My mother was a nurse. My grandmother, she worked with women, infants, and children. Her mother was the wife of a Pentecostal minister working in the ministry of the church. And my great great grandmother, as the story was told to me, she helped to heal soldiers. Everybody did work that leaned into helping. And here I am, helping people.
Wow. I'm curious to know, Kim, what is showing up for you right now to listen to
Oh my
Tina talk?
gosh. Well, first of all, the granny, I just love the grandmother stories and the legacy. Your grandmothers are leaving you a legacy, which is what I've been focusing on recently. But when you talk about overcoming, what helped, how did we overcome some of these things? There's two things that happened to me that were life-changing. The first one was shortly after my son died. And when you lose a child, your life is just shattered. You just don't even know, the world doesn't even look right, and when you lose them to suicide, it's even shattered more, if you can believe that. And about 2 months, my husband and I were dentists, and we had a practice. And about 2 months after my son died, I was walking out of the dental office in the evening, and my husband was standing there, and he had just had a liver transplant, so he was not, he was recovering physically and emotionally. We were just a big wreck. We were just a wrecks. And he had a cousin. One of his cousins was with him, and the cousin had lost his brother at about the same age. Eric was 19, and he had lost his brother at 19. And at the same time he lost his brother, because his parents couldn't overcome the grief, he felt that he lost his parents too, because he lost them emotionally. And he came up to me at that time, and I was a wreck. I was in that zombie, when you have a horrible tragedy happen in your life, you go through the zombie phase, right? Where you're inside, there's nothing there, and you're trying to get through the life, and you're trying to smile and maybe move a little, you're like a zombie, you're dead on the inside. And so he came up to me when he was wagging his finger, and he wagged his finger right at me, and he said, "Don't you ever let your remaining children feel that they are not enough." And he said that to me, and he caught me by surprise, because like, I'm a grieving mother. I mean, people weren't shaking their finger at me at that time. I was a grieving mother. How dare he say something like that? And then it just hit me. He was so right, that when something bad happens to you, you're a mother. I have two remaining daughters. When something, even as hard as it was, my husband just had a liver transplant, so I'm trying. He's not doing well either. I had to fight my way, kicking and clawing, out of that grief pit, and it took a long time. But as I was trying to get out of it, and all of you have had trauma, everyone has trauma in their life if they live long enough, right? So as you're trying to fight your way out of that pit, remember that your grief affects everybody around you. And the longer I stayed in the grief pit, the longer I would be affecting my children and my husband, who all needed to heal as well. So that, and very few people can say that. You can't wag your finger and say something like that unless you've been through it yourself. But I knew what he meant. So that really hit me hard, that it's my job to fight, to be there for the rest of my family. The other thing that happened was, shortly after that, I was drawn to, and you're in Africa, Tina, which is the continent with my favorite country, which is Rwanda. I was drawn to Rwanda. A long story, but I ended up there with Books for Africa, and we have 65 Eric Harms memorial libraries there. We did libraries in honor of my son. And I went to Rwanda, and oh my goodness, when you think about that country, they went through a horrible genocide in 1994. They are now a country that's one of the safest in Africa. It's safety level #1 from the US State Department. It's just as safe as going to Canada. People sometimes worry about some of those countries they're not familiar with. It's a wonderful country. It's a beautiful country. And they managed to come out of their horrible pit, through forgiveness and reconciliation and seeking justice. It's the most amazing place ever. And I went there, and I was just embraced by these wonderful people who had lost their whole families. I lost one son. They lost their whole families, yet they'd rebuilt their lives, and they were exhibiting to me joy that at that time it was hard to understand, because it was only a couple of years after my son died. But I think we need to look around the world for examples of people and of countries that have overcome some obstacles that we couldn't even imagine. And I was blessed to be able to do that.
Thank you for sharing that. I had a thought, and if I may ask you, Kim, you think that first of all, it's a horrible tragedy that I cannot even comprehend it myself. I'm not a mother, so but I can only try to imagine. But you think part of not being able to completely recover, like people go through this, not you, thanking the Lord, the higher powers, you were able to recover for the sake of your kids, the people around you, and but you think that sometimes we experience guilt even in a completely recovery. I mean, a guilt in having back the joy of the life.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, especially my mother took her own life. My son took his life. And where am I? I'm in the middle. There's so much additional, there's guilt surrounding death anyway, but there's so much additional guilt surrounding suicide. And I've met with a lot of mothers because you start hanging out with your own kind, right? When something like this happens. So I've met a lot of mothers that have lost children, some to murder, some to suicide. And there's so complicated to get through that. One of the ways I was able to do that certainly was I have faith, and I happen to be Christian, and one of our tenets is the joy of the Lord is your strength. And so I was focusing on that. I was focusing, okay, that's what it says. Yeah, that's what it says. Do I believe it? But it took me, I don't want to sugarcoat. It took me the first 5 years I was kind of coming out of the zombie phase, and then the next 5 years I was starting bit by bit by bit to remove that shroud of grief that hangs over you, and to find the joy of the Lord. And I have these 6 grandchildren. And Tina, I'm so glad you talked about your grandmothers. I hope I'm a good grandmother to them like your grandmothers are to you. I have 6 grandchildren, and I cannot tell you the joy that I have just being with them, and hugging them and going to their little games, and I feel that God gave me a new life with new people, and I'm just so focused right now again on leaving that legacy, just like Tina's grandmothers and great grandmothers, and oh my gosh, what a fascinating story, are leaving to her. And and I think if you live your life with a purpose in mind, God's not done with me yet. My purpose is to be here and leave a legacy to my children and my grandchildren. I have a job to do, and I just need to do it. When you can live with a purpose in your mind, and and it involves helping other people, it really, that's the best thing to lift you out of that grief pit. It's one of the best ways to overcome your grief, is when you have a purpose and you're helping other people. It's one of the best ways to overcome grief.
I saw so much connection. I'm listening to both of you right now. And this is what I've seen. So, Kim, you've had a lot of loss. And Tina, you were able to talk to what's not there, but it's still here. So now, if we kind of connect both stories, Kim, you've lost your mother, your son, and your husband before the time, or just whatever time they was gone. And Tina, being that you got the clairvoyant skills, and tying these two stories together, I think this synchronicity is happening here for both of you guys, because how do you make friends, Kim, with somebody that's clairvoyant, and Tina, how do you connect with somebody that lose so many people in their life? So I'm curious, Tina, how do you make that connection here?
So first, I have to ask permission, Kim. Can I share with you?
Absolutely.
So I wrote something on my book amongst everything else, and you can't see it. You won't be able to see it.
Mom, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Well, that's going to make me cry.
And that's why I had to ask permission.
Oh, absolutely.
And unfortunately, you didn't know. Because when I am, this is always one of my fears, this is another fear, that I'm going to be in a space and someone will speak about their loved ones, and all of a sudden they come and join me in my space that I'm in, because it's safe, it's sacred.
Yeah.
And I always ask permission, because it's important that I do that, because sometimes people are not ready to receive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also why I'm unapologetic about being a medium, because I know that it can happen.
Yeah.
Because they feel like they're in this space and the energy has somehow connected to me, and they just flow in.
Mhm.
And literally, I feel there's presence sitting across my couch. And I actually see your husband like playfully choke holding your son.
Yeah.
Like, come on. like doing that jokingly. And but I don't know what it was that you said when I stopped and I had to write it down. And this is what my life is like.
Mhm.
So I have this level of awareness when I am feeling the presence of loved ones, because I want to make sure that I'm delivering the message appropriately. And I don't know always what it means. It may not mean anything to me. I may say a word that is significant to someone. I may smell something that is significant to another party, and I just have to deliver the message. And my message is just like, Mom, I'm sorry. And I just see Dad fake choke holding, like this playfulness that's between the two of them. And Mom is just sitting there rocking back and forth.
Mhm. And it's interesting. That's how you because of my view of death, that that's just transferring from this life to the next life.
Mm-hmm.
When my husband died, and he actually died twice, but that's a different story. When he died, I knew he was going to be with Eric and our son, and it made that transition for me easier, knowing that he was going to, because when you lose a child, you just want to, you want to be with them, but I've got two other
Mhm.
kids, so I need to, I need to be
Right.
here for them and all my grandchildren. But there was something that made that transition when Jim died easier, because I knew he was going to be with our son, and that understanding that life goes on
Mhm.
is so important to us. And again, leaving that legacy while you're here.
Yeah, definitely.
I love that, by the way. Thank you so much, Tina. See,
Thank you, Tina.
I don't know. I feel like taking a pause right here and just kind of feel what I'm feeling, because it is beautiful to find a way to connect with people that are still connected, but we just don't know it.
Mm-hmm.
And all this connection is present. We're just not present to feel it. They're saying that this is what it's saying. It says our five sense perception are there to detect what comes and goes,
Mhm.
but now it's always here. So like air is always present, so we can't really see it because it's always present. Just like spirit is always present, we just can't see it because it's always here because it doesn't come and go. But then you have that sixth sense, some of us more activated, and I think Tina got hers activated where she can kind of tell what's currently present. And it's beautiful to see how that works out. And I don't know who you guys end up on the same podcast today, but for some reason it happens like that. And I just love the way it
There's
happens.
no such thing as coincidence. That's something I
Speak.
wholeheartedly believe in.
Mhm.
Things are always with intention. They were supposed to happen exactly the way they were. And maybe there was a message that Kim was supposed to receive or needed to receive.
Mhm.
And I just happened to be the vessel, because initially I think my interview was by myself, and then we connected. There was a shift in the date, and
Mhm.
then Kim was added. Me and Kim were connected. There's no such thing as coincidence. Like,
Mhm.
how can someone who had lost be on a show with a medium?
Mm. Mm.
Like, how does that happen? Like, no such thing as coincidence. It happened for a reason.
What does this mean for you right now, Kim?
Well,
To be having this conversation and just going through this right now.
well, it's wonderful. And I again, I have a deep faith, and I don't feel this life is all there is, and there's something more. And it's just wonderful to feel their presence a little more closely, and to think about Jim, giving Eric a noogie. It just kind of
Yeah, that's what it's called, a noogie.
that was where kind of like, you do one of those things.
Yeah.
But it really, so when you're here, I'm left, we're left here and our ancestors have moved on.
Mhm.
When you're here, it's so comforting to know that they're still there and that you're going to be there, soon. Cause I'm in that fourth quarter, right? I'm in the last quarter of my life. I'm going to be there soon. And then just to make the most of what I'm here to do. And again, keep that focus on the goal that I've got a purpose. There's a reason I'm here. And then knowing that Jim and Eric are up there having a good time, because when you lose a loved one, I mean, your brain, it's more important to know where your loved one's going to go after they die than where you go after you die, right? Because you got some, we would gladly give up our lives for our loved ones, right? I mean, it's even more important. And so just to know that Jim and Eric are up there or somewhere, wherever that is, and are together and is amazing. So thank you very much, Tina. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. And
I
you
know,
said not too soon, by the way.
What's
Yeah.
that?
When you said soon, they said not too soon.
Oh, okay. Oh, good. Well,
Not
tell
too
them good, because I got stuff to do here.
Not too soon. That's awesome.
Not too soon.
I was thinking about Lav too, because I think Lav lost her dad when she was young. And so the lost thing is I mean, all of us, I don't have any recent loss in my life, but I know both between Lav and Kim, you guys probably can talk about that lost thing. So, what are your thoughts over there?
Well, yeah, when you guys said that there's no coincidence, I smiled because I'm not always present on this topic, unfortunately. Due to the nature of my job, I'm a realtor. I have meetings sometimes later throughout the day. I have showings, and I cannot be present every day. It so happened that today I almost made it in the last minute, and it probably wasn't a coincidence. I was probably needing to hear this conversation. And yes, I did. I lost my father when I was 14, and that was a traumatic experience for me as well. And not only him, my grandparents all died around his death. So I grew up with my mom and my brother, and that was they are a blessing, and they were a blessing, and they were a very loving, supporting family members. But one misses their father every now and then, right? Their daddy.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay, y'all are not going to have a party in my house with your loved ones.
Hello.
Oh God, this is
Oh.
hilarious. And here's the funny thing, Azure. Before I came onto the live, even though I forgot about it and my alarm went off, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I have an interview."
Mhm.
I was filling out something to have a conversation about my dad. I lost my dad 3 or 4 years ago.
Mhm.
And he's been on my mind, and every time I see cardinals, it reminds me of my dad. I always know he's present when a cardinal shows up. Whenever I'm working through something, there's an appearance of him. And so literally before I came on the show, I was thinking about my dad, and I was writing something out. And one key piece about my dad that I wish he had the opportunity that I had the opportunity to share with him was our last conversation together. I talked to him about wanting to leave the country. Like I kept saying, Dad, I'm thinking about leaving the country. And at this time I had left New Jersey, lived in Georgia for a few years, and I kept getting nudged to go back home. And I went back home and I spent some time with my dad. We went to his favorite restaurant. And I was like, I'm really thinking about, I want to live outside the country. I don't know exactly where yet, blah, 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 blah. And he was like, Tina, you anything you put your mind to, you can do it. My parents have always told me that. But my relationship with my dad and relationship with my mom were two totally different scenarios. And he had this mild temper he just laid back. What, Tina, you can do it. And it's just so interesting because I was just literally writing, I wish I had gotten the opportunity to physically tell him I left the freaking country.
Mm.
I know spiritually he knows because he was in the midst of everything happening. And in my home in Georgia, there used to be a cardinal who would always come on my balcony whenever I was sitting on the couch, and I would see it peeking in the window. So I got pictures of it looking in my window in my balcony doors. So it's just so interesting that we're all sitting here sharing about our loved ones that we miss. And now there's a little party going on in my living room. But yeah, I understand.
Wow. Anybody want to share?
I'm just grateful that you've got this talent and you're willing to share it with people, because it's encouraging.
You know what's so interesting, Kim? This gift, it doesn't everybody's not always comfortable with it. And even as I was starting to navigate it, and sharing with other people, I know that I'm being nudged to do certain things as I go through certain periods of awakenings. And sometimes one is more prominent than the other. My clairvoyancy was prominent early on when I first discovered, or it was revealed to me that I had this gift. And then it started shifting into the mediumship. I had this one client in my former home. I used to have a working fireplace, and her father would always come and smoke cigars by my fireplace, and I could smell the stench of the cigars, and no one smoked in my home. And so I would always call her and be like, "What are you doing?" And she goes, "Why?" I says, "Because I smell your father's cigar." And she would laugh, and then she would say, "Well, Tina," and I'm like, "Well, here we go again." But everyone's not comfortable with it. There are some people who will try to test me, and that's where I'm like, I have nothing to prove to anyone. I'm giving you certain signs of, this is what I see. I'm giving you imagery. I'm giving you visions of imagery. I have this one story that I love it. I travel to Anguilla, British West Indies often because I host healing retreats there. On one particular occasion, I'm on the ferry and I'm talking to the driver about something. And this woman overhears me talking and she learns what I do. We get off the ferry and she reaches over to me and she says, "Can I have one of your cards? Because I would love for you to come to my villa and give me a reading." And I'm like, "Sure, no problem." Now, typically when a client registers to have a reading, I get the vision, or their loved one comes to visit me the night before. And so when I get to her place the next day, I says, "I have to share something with you. I don't know if it means anything for you, but allow me to share." And I says, "For some reason, I see this woman dancing and I see a red bandana." And I says, "I don't know what it means." And she didn't say anything. She let me proceed to having her reading. And then after, in the midst of her reading, she's getting very emotional because I'm telling her things that I should not know. Then she says, "I need to show you something." And she pulls out her phone, and there's a video of her and her mother dancing. And her mother had a red bandana on her head because she had suffered from cancer. And that was the last time that they had spent together. And she's like, "There's no way you would have known that." And I'm like, I'm perplexed too. But this is what happens to me. And it's important for me to make sure that people are open to receiving it. When they ask, I'm like, "Are you prepared for what I'm going to share with you?" Because people are not always prepared, because sometimes they're like, "She's not real." I'm like, "Yes, I am."
Have you met a lot of people like you so far?
The most interesting thing is how I started working with it. There was a young lady, I call her my Reiki girl. She was probably the first person that I met as I was navigating, understanding all of this. Now that I am sort of knee deep into it, I've come across several people. There are people who have been following me, and understand this work that I was called to do. And I also can sometimes peg those people who are disingenuous about their work as well. What's so unfortunate is that social media creates this space for people to come online and say and do certain things. And I am always challenging people because I go live on TikTok a lot. And I tell people all the time, you have to have a level of discernment and making sure that the person that you're sharing your information with, because that's energy that's connecting with you between the two of you, that they are real. Don't jump because they're telling you, "Oh, I see something from you." And first of all, those of us who have this gift, if we are real, we don't hop in your inbox saying, "I have a message for you." We don't do that. We allow people to come to us. We don't go reach out to them. And I don't do it because my energy is just highly sensitive. I'm not jumping in anybody's inbox. What's so interesting is that my mom's a minister, and my great-great-grandfather is a minister. So when you look at this from the religious perspective, some people consider it evil. Okay? I always struggle with what makes me any different than a prophet. They're still sharing the information with you. However, I encounter a lot of women who were raised in the church, and they're struggling between, I know I have visions, I know I see this, but if I lean into it, God's going to do something to me. And I call God Gus, God, universe, source. You were given this gift for a reason, and no one can judge you but your higher power. So if you lean into what other people believe, because that's their belief, it's not yours. Because I asked you a question, is there anything evil about you? And they're like, no. So why would you think that you would be blessed with a gift and you would be considered evil? I say, your gift isn't evil, but there are evil people. And there's a difference. There are evil people who do evil things. That is 100% different. And so I encounter it. I encounter someone who says, what you're doing is ministry, and you should be doing this. And I'm like, no, I should be guided exactly how I'm doing it, because my mother has the gift. My mother is a minister. My mother doesn't work in her gift. But we have to remember, in their time, it's different. And here and now, it's something it's a whole nother animal. And we have the gift of free will to speak freely. Back then, you can't speak freely because they're going to do something to you. And so the dynamics are different. And what's great is there are other women, because predominantly the energy I connect with is women, but I do work with men as well. It just, you go through this, you're having this period of awakening, and you're wondering, who do I talk to about it? Because I don't want anyone to think I'm crazy. And I feel like every experience that I've had prepares me for the women who come to me, because literally I was going through clinical depression and an awakening at the same time. And I'm in my therapist thinking, I'm seeing dead people and you're going to put me in a hospital. But what was great was I had an amazing therapist who leaned into spirituality, who played a sound bowl, and who meditated with me before our sessions. And that's when I knew I could be transparent with him of, I'm seeing dead people. And when I said it, I questioned him. I was like, I just need to make sure he's not going to put me in the hospital. And he's like, why would I do that? I was like, because I'm going to tell you something that just don't sound right, because I was struggling mentally as well with it. And once I told him, I said, you're not going to put me in the hospital, right? He's like, no. He says, are you going to hurt anyone? I said, no. He said, are you going to hurt yourself? I said, no, I love me. He's like, okay, then tell me. And I go, well, I'm seeing my grandmother, my great-grandmother, and so. And he goes, oh, that's beautiful. And I go, you're not going to put me in the hospital, right? He goes, no, Tina. I says, they're dead. And he looked at me and he goes, oh, that is so beautiful. I was like, it is? Because I think I'm going crazy. And I've leaned into it.
Speaking of the ultimate fear, knowing that about yourself and afraid to tell other people because they would think you're crazy. But then you find a way to come out.
Yep.
And start sharing that. So now that fear is like your friend.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What's going on through your mind here, Kim?
Well, I just think that, as a Christian as well, judgment I just take whatever comes, and judgments is God's a judge. But I think when you have something that comes to you, I think that using it is so important. How it would be horrible if you didn't use it. And I just think it's a wonderful, wonderful thing that you're doing for people, and doing it in different parts of the world, which is fascinating. But I'm still connected with your grannies. I really want to meet them when I get up there. So, The thought of your grandmothers is just really,
they're
really,
sweet.
it just,
They're
it's
so
wonderful.
sweet. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
thank you
what's
for
great
sharing all
is,
that.
I'm sorry,
Go ahead,
Lev.
Tina.
What's great is that I got to physically meet all of them except my great great grandmother. She's the only one that I didn't meet. And so to know their mannerisms, to know their personalities, to know who they were and what and the work that they've done. Like I lived with my mother's mother for a period of time. So I know so much about her. So when I had those journals in my hand, because my aunt had like a lot of things from my grandmother. And she one day, I was telling her what I was experiencing, and she sent the journals to me. There were 3 journals, and I'm reading the journals. My grandmother had written about living with my great great grandmother in Washington, D.C. She had written about breaking her arm the first time wearing pantyhose, and then some family history. It was just so interesting. And then she would write about certain things that she had dreams about. And I'm calling my aunt, like, do you remember this happening? And my aunt's like, no. And you were like 2. You were like 1 or 2 years old. So how do you remember? I'm telling her things verbatim. I'm describing places to her. And she's looking at me like I have 2 heads. Like, how would you know that? And I'm like, I remember all of this. And that was something that was so, like, I am so glad my grandmother wrote. And there were pieces of paper in there where she was telling about the family names and the history. And what I did was, I was the first person in the family to read it. My aunt had never read that. She just gave me the box. So I bought another box and I bought an additional journal to pass through the family, because everybody ended up getting to see the box and read the journals and pass it through her children. My mom's the oldest of 10, and then the grandchildren. And I was the firstborn grandchild.
Wow. I think this is a wrap.
Actually, before we wrap up, I would love to hear this from Kim. How are you helping people? You said you're a public speaker,
Yes.
and you still have work to do here before you go to
Yes.
see your other dear one.
Well, again, my book is "Are You Ready?" So because we're all gonna die, all of us. Like I know I'm in the 4th quarter, but you guys might be. You just don't know. But I know I'm in mine because our life is gonna end. Are you ready? How to build a legacy to die for? And I'm trying to help people get their affairs in order, but also to leave an emotional life insurance plan for their kids, which means take care of any forgiveness that needs to take place, apologize, reconcile, and write. I encourage them to write legacy love letters to them that will be given to them after they die, so that they can be reminded how much they were loved. And also, I think one of the things that we forget sometimes is that most of us are not clairvoyant. Tina gets to have the advantage of hearing from her grandmothers and great grandmothers what's been happening in their lives, but my children won't know what happened when I was younger unless I tell them. So I really recommend that everyone just take their phones, and I have questions in the book about what they can ask themselves or have someone else do it, and make a little legacy video that talks about how things were when they were younger, things that were important to their lives, what failures did they have, what can they bring, what can they bring to their children, and then write letters for weddings, write letters when the children graduate from high school, and you can give it to them if you're alive. You can give it to them still. I wrote this 10 years ago and I'm still here, so here's a letter. Or if you passed away, they're going to remember you and you're going to carry on that legacy, just like Tina's grandparents, except you're just going to do it in writing because we're not all clairvoyant, so we aren't going to hear them. So I'm recommending everyone do what Tina's grandparents were doing and get ready to leave a legacy to the people that are remaining here.
I love it, Kim. I want to share this thing before we all go. If I have one regret somewhat, is is that I wasn't able to have an adult conversation with my father, right? Because I was a kid when he passed away. And my mother gave me some of his letters. He wrote some letter to his parents when he was in the military. He was a doctor. And then from college, and some poetry that he wrote. And I read it, and I felt this burning desire to have met him and just have an adult conversation with my mind right now about life, about him, about his life, about all. And I had this thought that I asked my mom to write me thoughts, letters, so I can have them always with me because I cherish those letters from my father, even though they were not from me, to read his thoughts, to imagine him writing it down, go with my fingers over the letters thinking that he wrote that. It helped me a lot, right, to stay connected somehow and experience him and his love. So it's a great idea. Thank you for reminding me about it because I'm going to Romania next month, so I'll make sure I'll stand there next to mom and write the letters because I guess she's skeptical about it. She feels weird. So I'm like, no, there's no time. Write me my letters.
While you're healthy, before you get sick, that's when you do it.
Yeah.
Wow, Tina, I'm sorry, Kim. I love that book concept, by the way. So you sit down and you think about those significant moments that's gonna show up, and you put together a note about what you feel and what you think about that moment, what you need to think or feel about that moment for that person. And wow, that's beautiful. I want to think about that because I do a lot of writing too. I'm thinking about it. Maybe I should, chronicle some stuff down for the future and see what that comes out to be.
It's great. And my mother-in-law did that, and she was from Norway, and she was in Saskatchewan riding on a sleigh with potatoes in her pockets to keep her hands warm on the way to school in the morning. Those are things you would never know. We would never know that if we didn't do it now. If we didn't write it down now, because the world's going to be a very different place in 10, 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
Most definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're at the time to wrap up. I was going on the room. So Tina and Kim, start with you, Kim. If somebody got to reach out, find you, connect with you, what's the best way for them to reach you and connect with you?
Then go right onto my website at drkimberlyharms, HARMS.com.
Okay. And same for you, Tina. Best way to reach you?
The best way to reach me is you can connect with me through my website at tinachines.com. Or you could probably find me hanging out on TikTok. I go live on there every now and again. I do energy clearings on the live as well as sometimes I do card readings.
Nice. So, Tina, what is your biggest takeaway from this conversation?
My biggest takeaway is, again, I will go back to there's no such thing as coincidence and how we all ended up in this space together tonight. And that in some form or fashion, we received confirmation. Mm-hmm. Even I received confirmation, even though you may not know it, but I've received confirmation of, that our loved ones are around us, that what we're doing is what we're supposed to be doing. And I want to target one thing about Kim's book. I like that she was intentional about the question, what to write, what types of letters to write. Because most people say, well, just write a letter to so-and-so. No, I love that it was intentional of a wedding or graduation or what have you, those significant moments. I did want to remember to say that to you. But yeah, that's what I'm walking away with. No such thing as coincidence. We ended up all here for a reason. Thank you, Asher, for creating the space.
My pleasure. At your service, Tina, just like you always be for others. Kim, what's your biggest takeaway?
Well, I think just reinforcement that we are, we're here for a short time, but we can do things now to build up for the next generation. And in Tina's case, her grandmothers are still building her up, and just that connection. I hadn't thought of that, Tina. I was thinking about, the rest of us who don't have grandparents coming back to us. And so it was just fun for me to see that your grandparents were doing it. And then hopefully to help the rest of us to do it as well, so that we are here to build up that next generation. Tina's grandparents are building her up, and that's what we're to do. We're here to build up and make it better for the next generation. And unless we can express what happened, what we learned, all the things we went through, because we've been through a bunch of bad stuff and a lot of good stuff too. But unless we can teach the next generation how to be resilient, how to forgive, how to apologize, how to know they are enough alone. You know, if somebody dies, they're still enough, and that they affect everyone around them. Unless we can do that, they're going to just start over and do the same things that we did. And again, in Rwanda, that was the best thing I learned from Rwanda is they forgave, they reconciled, they did everything they could to build their country back because they didn't want their children to go through the same thing they went through. And that works for all of us. That's universal. And so thank you, Tina, for your stories. It was very comforting to me to hear them.
Queen Lab, what's your biggest takeaway?
Thank you both. Again, my biggest takeaway is confirmation that our dear ones are a lot, taking care of us and around us. And another one was the reminder to make my mom record voice notes or write down letters or videos, and I'm on a mission and I'll do it next month. So thank you both.
Thank you.
I have a closing question to ask for everybody, so I'm gonna ask both of you, Kim and Tina, see what you thought. But for the closing question is, what is that one thing or two thing when people do it drives you crazy? If you don't mind sharing.
I think that as human beings, we are addicted to being right.
Mhm.
And we're addicted to being right to a degree that if somebody disagrees with us or has a different opinion, they don't just have a different opinion, they're somehow evil. You know, we somehow put our view is right, theirs is wrong, so we're good, they're bad. I see that happening all around us, and it's so divisive. And I think that we need to just understand that different people have had different experiences in life. And Tina is a good example. You've had you have a whole new gift that none of the rest of us have. So you're going to have insight that we don't have. And I think that we need to just learn to appreciate that and be open to it. And just within our society today, come together, forgive each other, try to understand each other, because we're fighting each other. I think all of our politicians need to go down to Rwanda to figure out how it's done to get along, you know? And so that's my biggest peeve, is that we are not respectful, and we don't try to understand, we try to prove ourselves right. And that just drives me crazy.
Tina, what about you?
For me, it is people who are, when you're having conversations with one another, they're not listening. They're listening to respond. They're not listening to hear the person and what they're saying. Because sometimes there are people who they just need to get something up and out, and they don't want a response. Versus, I'm waiting for you to breathe so I can respond to whatever you said. That's one of my pet peeves. I'm like, pause and just, do you hear what I'm saying? And what I like to always say is two things. Are you sharing this to vent, or are you sharing this to complain? Because venting means you just need to get it off your chest. But if you're complaining, that means you're going to work on it. There's something to work on. So I'm like, can you just lean in and listen? And asking the person, do you need a response, or do you want me to listen? Because I'm showing up in two different spaces if I'm just listening versus I'm going to give you a response. I'm going to allow myself to be your sounding board. So that's one of my pet peeves, is when people just waiting to, let me just respond to the question. I'm like, that wasn't a question. I was speaking rhetorically. I just wanted to get some things off my chest.
Beautiful. Any last word from you, Lab?
Throwing the question back at you. And that's it. Thank you both, ladies. You were wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, this has been an incredible conversation. And it was started off trying to figure out, because I swear to God, this is what I always do when I get two or three of us on here. I'm trying to figure out, what is the synchronicity here? What is the connection here while we are short? Because these are all random dates. Where everybody pops up, and I've been noticing there's a connection point between most of the guests that shows up. And so I was listening earlier. I was like, okay, let me hear what is there, because I'm this is a validation for me from the universe. Like, Asher, there's something going on here. I'm gonna show it to you again. I'm gonna show it to you again. I'm gonna show it to you again. I'm keep seeing it. So it's been incredibly nice to see it plays out this way, where people come on and they have so much connection, so much in common. That means we're all the same. We just
And not
see the
only
world
that,
differently.
Tina, you wrote a book And we actually have in the book the word, the acronym that we use for God, which is GAS.
Yes.
God,
That
universe, soul. So when you said it, I made a face. So maybe you thought I make a face because that's weird. I made a face because what?
yeah.
Yeah.
That same thought visited you, visited me, visited everybody, right? So yeah, I love it. Awesome.
Thank you all.
Well, it's been a pleasure. And
Mhm.
we're gonna go ahead and call this a wrap. You tune into Pandora's Awareness Podcast, a place where we collect stories and circulate life-changing wisdom. And you've gotten wisdom from Tina and Kim today and Queen Live. And with that, everyone, make it an awesome day.
Thank you so much.